So, the best way to resolve conflict is to take action before it reaches a crisis point. Here's the thing, right? When we're talking about conflict, we normally see it right at the end. And that's a problem because a conflict isn't just something that bang, happens one day. It tends to be a series of small things which build up to that level where you get that conflict. As a result of which, we need to be more mindful. We need to be more aware. We need to be more proactive to try and solve a problem before it gets to that crisis point. And we notice this, or we do this by noticing the developing discomfort and minor incidents, which leads to tension. There are different levels of conflict if you think about it. The first level is discomfort, right? Discomfort. So we're maybe discussing an idea or we're about to launch or release a new policy. If you see people not feeling super comfortable with it, it becomes our responsibility to talk to them and say, hey, do you have any questions? Let's solve some of the gray areas. And let's be honest, at this point, we might not have all the answers, but let's at least put our hand out and say, hey, do you have any questions? The next level up becomes incident. If we don't solve it at the very first level of discomfort, it can turn into an incident where people now start to proactively feel, they proactively start to think, and all of a sudden you are going towards the next area, which is misunderstanding. For example, as a business, you might have created a policy to do this. As you release the policy, people start to feel uncomfortable or feel discomfort, but we didn't take the time to ask them what they're thinking or what they're feeling, which leads to the incident, which is the policy is not working, and all of a sudden something's happening, which is affecting the people that you're working with, which leads to misunderstanding, because now they turn around and look at you and they go, hey, things were fine the way things were. Why did you change it? So misunderstanding happens here, and this builds to tension. When you get to the tension level, here we've got a problem. This is the crisis point. You know, you've launched a new policy which is designed to make people's lives better or easier or safer, but we didn't take the time to gather the feedback at the initial stage, implement what we learned from that feedback to create a better policy or to take better actions. So we went through all four levels and we made people feel uncomfortable. Incident takes place, misunderstanding happens, and tension builds. So we reached that crisis point. So here's the thing. How do we handle conflict in the workplace? Step one, talk with the other person, right? Let's discuss it. Let's try and understand from more than one perspective. If this is what we want to do, well, let's hear what you have to say. Let's hear what you think. Let's hear what you feel and discuss it. At this particular point, we have to look at focusing on people's behavior and event and not on the personality. So that's step two. Focus on behavior and event, not personality. Step three, listen carefully. Remember, our goal should be the same, right? If we're working together as a team, our goal should be the same, to achieve this thing up here. How we do it, that's up to us. But the key part is us. We can't do this by ourselves. So we've got to listen carefully to the other person. Step four, identify points of agreement and disagreement. So this is where we evaluate, right? So you have some valid points. I have some valid points. We both have some points that don't make so much sense, but let's discuss it and try and identify things that we agree on and disagree on. The next level becomes step five, which is where we prioritize the areas of conflict. Now, chances are, because we're all heading towards that same goal, we're not going to disagree on everything. If we do, we have a really big problem, probably a relationship conflict. So let's look at the areas that we don't agree on and then prioritize the areas of conflict, meaning let's see what the key areas are where we are really far apart in our thinking and feeling, and let's prioritize on working on those. Once we do that, then we can develop a plan to work on each other's conflict. Because remember, sometimes the best ideas we might have, they can come from areas of disagreement. You disagree with this particular action because of this particular reason. I disagree with this action for this particular reason. Now, within those reasons, maybe there's a really solid, valid point, which could critically affect the success or failure of what we're trying to achieve. So we develop a plan to work on these conflicts. Step 7, follow through our plan. Now that we've spent the time and the effort of putting all this together, let's follow through. Let's make it happen. And then build on our success, which is step 8. So whatever works, let's take it, implement it. Once we implement it, let's look at it to see why it worked, and let's build on it. So next time we have a project, rather than going, hey guys, here's a new policy, we'll come to you and say, hey guys, we're thinking about creating a new policy. Rationale, this is why we're thinking about creating a new policy. Processes, this is what we're coming up with, or this is what we're thinking about. Then we'll say, okay, let's have a discussion, maybe like a focus group, and talk about how we can make it better. And then let's sit down and start building it out. So here, by following these particular steps, we do it together, so it reduces the chances of conflict. Conflict is probably always going to be there, right? The idea is not to avoid it. The idea is to understand it. And by understanding it, coming up with solutions, which benefits not one, but benefits the many. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, benefiting the many. In business, we are successful, not because we're doing something for ourselves, but because we're serving other people. And in order to do that well, we need people to help us serve other people. And if we can do that, and we can all be brought along on this journey, then we can do things better. And that's what it's all about. Okay, so methods for resolving workplace difficulties. So we talked about mediation earlier. So let's look at negotiation, mediation, and arbitration, often called ADR or alternative dispute resolution, are the most well-known tools that we have to try and resolve a particular problem. Whether we are involved in a family or neighborhood dispute or a lawsuit involving thousands of dollars, these processes should be considered. So when we're trying to solve a workplace difficulty, brainstorming becomes key, right? Let's all sit down, let's come up with ideas. Dividing the problem into smaller pieces. One of the things that I've realized in life is big problems are not that difficult to solve. It tends to be the thousands of little problems that come together to become a big problem that becomes difficult to solve. So if we want to solve that problem, let's divide it into its smaller components and tackle one at a time. We also want to identify the outcome that we want. Now, if we have a conflict, if we're having difficulties, chances are the goal which we thought was really clear, maybe it's not very clear for everybody. So let's identify the outcome that we want so that goal that we have becomes clear for everyone in our team. So this way, we're all moving towards the same direction. The next one is a little bit interesting, trial and error. We all want that one perfect solution, but very, 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 very rarely does the one perfect solution exist. A key part of business is trying different things, making mistakes, learning from mistakes, and trying again and again and again and again. And eventually, you get the outcome that you want. The key thing is, during that trial and error process, you want to reduce the number of iterations as much as possible to get to that success part. Otherwise, you might run out of time, money, and patience. We also have to maintain current agreements and generate greater commitment. So maintaining current agreements basically means we need to make sure that we are all agreeing on what we need to do, how we need to do it, but we also need to get people to buy into the idea overall so we can get greater commitment going forward. Quite often when we have conflict, people lose focus. They become disheartened. It's normal, it's natural. Whether we're looking at personal conflict or business conflict, it's completely natural. You know, if you go to work and you get paid to do work, you're a professional, true. But we're still all humans. And as humans, it becomes very easy for us to get disheartened. And that's why it becomes incredibly important to generate greater commitment throughout this process. Think about it this way, right? You've got people working in a team and there's conflict. Now, you have a way of resolving this conflict. But if you don't get people to commit to that process, the chance of that conflict continuing is still very high. So even before you say, hey guys, let's all get together and talk about this, maybe talk to them individually and say, hey guys, do you want to fix this? If the answer is yes, brilliant. Let's all commit to wanting to fix this. And then let's get together and do it. Another thing to consider is the obvious solution. Sometimes the obvious solution is not so obvious, but we still have to try and be impartial and consider what is the best way forward, not just for us today, but also for us in the future as well, and then make it happen. And of course, trial and error again, right? You try something, doesn't work, learn from it, do it better. In the business world, they talk about, trying different things and failing quickly. It's better to fail quickly than fail really, really slowly. If you fail quickly, then you don't use as much time, money, and energy. But if you can learn from it, then you put that into your next project, you're just a little bit closer to your next success. And when it comes to dealing with conflict, it really is no different, right? Try different things, learn from your mistakes, keep going, and get people to commit to it.